So for her to show herself in this very sort of poised, regal guise, again, was something new. Mm-hmm. So that portrait is not only beautiful, but it can be read in quite interesting ways.
Claudia, congratulations on the exhibit. It is, from what it looks like, it looks to be absolutely amazing. So beautiful. So many interesting photos and stories behind these photos. So tell me, how did this exhibition kind of come about?
Well, thank you so much. It came about really because Kensington has a long history of relationships with key people in the royal photographic history. So Queen Victoria was born here in the 19th century, and of course her reign was the very first to be captured on camera. And I'd done a lot of work on Queen Victoria's image making and really the way in which she used photography very carefully to shape her public image. And then of course Lord Snowdon, Anthony Armstrong-Jones, very important 20th century photographer, was also the husband of Princess Margaret, and they lived here at Kensington Palace during their marriage, and he had a darkroom here. So we were looking at Lord Snowdon's photography and his impact on royal photography. And then of course today, Kensington Palace is the home of the Duchess of Cambridge, and we know that she is a very talented amateur photographer, and she releases her own photographs of the children to the public on a regular basis. So it just seemed a very fitting topic for us to look at here at Kensington.
That's amazing. I love that all of that's tied together at Kensington Palace. I never made those connections. It must have been amazing to kind of put all the pieces together. As a curator for this exhibit, how on earth did you pick out which photographs to display? Because there must have been, thousands to choose from.
Yeah, narrowing down the images for this exhibition was probably the greatest task of my curatorial career so far. I was confronted with quite literally tens of thousands of photographs, and I was fortunate to spend a lot of time in the Royal Archives looking at the Royal Photographic Collection. I went to lots of the archives of different photographers who photographed the monarchy, and I think what emerged during the course of that research was that there was quite a clear pattern of representation that was, established during the 19th century and then repeated across the generations. And so there were certain types of photographs that we were seeing appear time and time again. And that really gave us a framework to work on. And then, of course, we wanted to look at some important, firsts, things like the first royal wedding photograph, and then to unpick some of those really iconic images that we know and try to understand, how do you create an image that will become iconic?
Yeah, so interesting. So out of all these iconic photos, what do you feel is the one photograph that's going to get everybody talking? Or probably a few, I would imagine.
Yeah, there are a few. And one of the most interesting ones, I think, is Chris Levine's holographic portrait of the Queen that was created in 2004. And to me, that really kind of underpins what we're saying in this exhibition. He said, we interviewed him for a film, which you can see in the exhibition. And he said during that, regardless of the content, the language was modern. And that sort of nicely summed up what we're saying. It was actually a very traditional portrait of the Queen. She's wearing the George IV diamond diadem, which is a very recognisable royal jewel. She's swathed in ermine. And that's a very traditional royal image. But then when you interact with that object, and because it's a hologram, you can't see it on screen. I hate to say it, but you've got to come here if you want to really understand the object. As you move around it, you see her in 3D. And to create that, he said that he filled the yellow drawing room of Buckingham Palace with a TARDIS of technology. So he had, a laser projecting onto her 3 different lighting rigs. It really was a very kind of technological experience. And it's her willingness to engage with that, which I think really shows them to be sort of a modern, progressive institution, very much of the 21st century. So, that one was really interesting, and I think goes to the heart of what we're saying. But then another one which we've got, which I think will be hugely popular, is an unseen portrait of Diana, Princess of Wales, which was taken by David Bailey in 1988. And that's interesting in a number of ways. She selected David Bailey as the photographer that she wanted to sit for. And at the time, he was a very surprising choice for a royal photographer. He was, very irreverent, kind of quite edgy fashion photographer, not the kind of person that you usually saw at that point photographing monarchy. So that in itself, I think, showed her desire to do something a bit differently. But then it's also quite an unusual depiction of her. And that's interesting because it's quite a typical royal depiction. She's shown in profile, she's stoic, she's regal, she's sort of contemplative, which is actually quite a sort of, quite a standard royal composition. But for Diana, that was unusual because, of course, until that point, she was doing something very different with her image. She was showing herself as a kind of warm, a friendly, sort of an intimate connection with the viewer. So for her to show herself in this very sort of poised, regal guise, again, was something new. So that portrait is not only beautiful, but it can be read in quite interesting ways.